Filipino food is comforting, flavorful, and a fast-growing trend in the food industry. So what's driving this explosive rise? I'm Brittany Bohr from the Food Institute, and you are watching 𝗂𝗏𝘁 Spotlight. The proof of popularity of Filipino food is very clear. Flavor Chase Trends report for 2025 from TasteWise said demand for Filipino foods has risen by nearly 50% in the past year. So what's the appeal of Filipino food? What makes up the taste profile? And how does this cuisine fit into the fabric of the American culinary scene? Here to answer these questions and more is restaurateur, filmmaker, and all-around media mogul, Billy Dec. Billy, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much.
So I'm really excited to dive into this topic. What do you think are the drivers of this rising interest in Filipino food in particular, and why now?
Nowadays, I think that there are a number of forces that are coming together. You know, there's a general, through social media, storytelling, an incredible influence and impact from Asian American or Asian Filipino storytellers, content creators, or just folks willing to share their love for the food that they grew up on. I think generally the mainstream is looking for new and different flavors, global cuisines. They're looking to explore adventure. And what a great way in which to go on the other side of the globe to 7,641 islands of the Philippines, the incredible diversity, not only being, so far from the US, but amongst itself, those 7,641 islands have different ways in which to cook some of the same dishes. They have access and influence from different countries. It's an incredible and always evolving and innovating cooking genre. The culinary genre is always influenced not only by the past through colonization or interacting with neighboring Southeast Asian countries. It could be also Spain or Mexico or India, but it's always kept an open mind to evolving and innovating. And I think that makes it very, very unique and intriguing and always entertaining and delightful.
You produced a really interesting documentary about your personal life journey of finding your roots in the Philippines called Food Roots, really showcasing the diversity of this food. Can you tell us about the role of Filipino food in the culture?
Filipino food is very much about family. It's about love. It's about taking care of people. And a lot of that was really highlighted and discovered and celebrated in this documentary, Food Roots, where I go back to the islands of the Philippines to learn the recipes of my ancestors. Because my Lola, who you see right here, was one of the best cooks ever, but I never got to learn the recipes that she had never written down. It wasn't part of the culture. You had to be present. And being in America, where there are so many other distractions and so many other things that define success, I really got pulled away from that. And so going back to the islands of the Philippines to do what my ancestors did with respect to looking for, harvesting, acquiring different ingredients from the land, sea, mountains, cities, and creating these dishes that had incredible impact on my family story, my heritage, really reinforced that this love and caring and comfort that I would say our culture expresses through food is so unique and beautiful. And it really taught me not only to think about hospitality and food as business, but really, again, sort of full circle in the way in which I was born and raised and grew up in a Filipino household, looking at food as life and love, especially with respect to family and friends.
Let's, for a minute now, talk about your restaurants. Sunda New Asian, you have several restaurants which feature multiple Asian cuisines, including Filipino dishes. So what are the keys to successfully introducing Filipino food and culture to American audiences in the US?
That's been a tough question, especially in the past. A lot of Filipino restaurants were mom and pop shops, quite humble, And if they tried to be more to really service the larger mainstream, there was a higher failure rate. It was very sad and concerning. And so when I started looking at ways in which to approach this, to celebrate the culture, heritage, culinary genre that I love, I had to be really strategic. And in New Asian food service, we're really taking traditional items and elevating them to the highest level. It's elevating the quality of the ingredients, the presentation, the cooking styles, the storytelling, the experiential, the interactiveness. I think having the passion, the knowledge, going deep, and not just generally as a country, but understanding the differences in the regions and the diversity amongst those 7,641 islands is just a really great way to marry traditional expertise with mainstream visual cues and things that get attraction and interest, intrigue, and trial to get folks trying the food. That balance for us was really important. And then in the case of Sunda New Asian, again, New Asian is the elevation of traditional Asian, Southeast Asian dishes and cocktails, beverages. But we sort of created a mix so that folks were able to also access things from Japan, China, Thailand, Vietnam, throughout Southeast Asia, and the Philippines. So it wasn't always a unilateral, single genre kind of experience. It was about backpacking throughout Southeast Asia and seeing the diversity of all of that in a very elevated way.
The month of May is AAPI month. So what are your thoughts on seeing the rise in exposure of Asian food in general in the mainstream? And where do you think that this presence could go further?
Well, it makes me so happy because once again, growing up Asian American early on, sort of being the ambiguous brown kid that really didn't look like anyone else on the street or in school or on the playground, it felt, and especially not only getting made fun of for maybe food that we would have at lunch, but when kids would come over after school, it would be like, what smells? What is that? But now it's very cool to see that folks are actually celebrating and looking for those things. I think it was pretty fascinating to see how folks really started celebrating more so at home during, let's say, COVID, when things were shut down. The amount of creators that came out to really share the items that they grew up with really exploded, not only from the celebrity chef or media standpoint, but just volume of folks, which really showed off these really unique, diverse offerings from all over Southeast Asia that look different. I also think that in furtherance of this global exploration, when people are diving deep on the other side of the world throughout Asia, they are going to discover real unique differences in different parts of whatever country they're in. And I think the hyper localization of and focus and storytelling around those ingredients, flavor profiles, cooking styles, it's just gonna, I think there's a lot of opportunity to further explore and no longer just categorize, Chinese food is Chinese food or Filipino food is Filipino food. You look at the Philippines, there's different regions, there's over 100 languages, dialects, there's 7,641 islands. There's so many different types of things to still find, these treasures all over Southeast Asia to still find. I think there's a lot of room for that.
Billy Dec, actor, filmmaker, restaurateur, and man of many talents. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of 𝗖𝗄𝘁 Spotlight. You can check out more of our great content by clicking on this playlist. Until next time, I'm Brittany Bohr with the Food Institute.